Good afternoon, Abbotsford residents. I'm Mr. Pelican. I'm running for your Commander-in-Chief here in Abbotsford. Why? Why do I make these videos? Why do I say it? I know that by running for that Commander-in-Chief, I can bring results, I can bring the law, and I can stop the organized crime in Abbotsford and give Abbotsford its voice back, give open mic back, and stop the threats by my Abbotsford APD. A criminal ring that was set up in Abbotsford so large that it makes fentanyl look like a tiny little thing on the world stage. A mob. As Pierre Poilievre said it the best at Clark Freightways, the M&Ms. So I want to talk to you today. Never mind the removal of Abbotsford Police to get the best in the RCMP so politicians can't be protected and this never takes place in our community again. You can see that Abbotsford residents had to struggle this all by themselves because Henry was controlling the MPs and made it clear, thanks to Darren Brown, if you went to their houses and called a video or called anything or did a podcast or news that I damaged that is what Jeffrey Epstein did to control politicians in the States. This is never going to take place again because we got to make sure that the private police never ever have this kind of power again under a mayor, even under me as being Commander-in-Chief. Abbotsford, myself, and residents, families, this wasn't about politics. Another politician taking on another politician. This came into threats into our families and on our doorsteps. It wasn't in the ledge or in debates or in the city. It was actually right at our doorsteps, circling with the task force and everything. Thanks to the Mission RCMP, what are tremendous human beings, Abbotsford and myself are tremendously thankful. Today I want to talk to you about something. I showed you the Chamber of Commerce, Alex Mitchell, when she endorsed and the stuff they were doing to load these elections and rig and block. That was why Rhiannon Gasper could unseat Pam by knocking on doors and doing hard work. I showed you the group pulling in the churches, which Henry did. My boy's weak, but he's still our boy, Ross. And I showed you Vicky Hopes of the newspaper. I showed you that Henry had the corners of the South Asians tied up through Andy Sidhu and the debates and everything. This should never have taken place. A democratic process, an election, and the law should stop it, and our law wasn't stopping it. So when the South Asians weren't getting represented in Abbotsford, they created their own business, South Asian business community, and appointed their board because the Chamber of Commerce was doing dirty garbage stuff. Craig Toes and his buddies, unless you conform, so they created doors. The Abbotsford farmers, I've been well back by helping them, and I'm tremendously a voice for them, and they need leadership. That is why I asked Bruce Banman, and I asked my great friend today, I'll ask him again, Suk Mangill, not to rub shoulders with the mayor that caused this harm, but actually do live podcasts with some of the Dutch farmers, and not just the Salvations, and get out and speak. I will stand here today, and I was asked that many farmers wanted to do it. They're scared of retaliation and threats by Henry. That I do know. They'll target their kids with the Abbotsford Police. They'll go out there and run roughshod. Because well, let me tell you, when I learned from the farmers that Henry Brown threatened Marion Mosquedam in the first flood, knowing that Marion Mosquedam would found out Bruce advocated money to fix the pumps and draw the majority of water off the Nooksack if it overflooded and fix the ditches, Henry said and went out to her and said on Sunday, let water be under the bridge or I'll bury you and bankrupt you. When the farmers brought me to that, I went face to face to that lady and confirmed and called it out worldwide. Henry was scared of his illegal criminal acts of what him and the bureaucrats were doing in the city and moving funds and dismantling the Dyke Committee. So what am I going to do today? The farmers asked that. I asked them to walk with me. I don't want them to walk with me because it endangers them. I want to stand here as one of the biggest assholes because this is the way my life got protected. I want to make sure that I'm asking my Abbotsford farmers to create your own board or your Dyke board. Until I become mayor, then I will financially reinstate it and get you funds. But create it for the Abbotsford Sumas flats and not the other flats. And don't let anybody on it. Don't let bureaucrats on it. Don't let anybody else create monthly reports that got to go to the city and monthly reports that are out there. So when there's any negligence by the city not doing their maintenance and everything else, that we can voice that and help them. You need to create that board. You do not need Dave Sidhu and all these people coming in to rub your shoulders. We're taking care of it. You need to look after yourself. You have to look after yourself, and that is the bottom line. An Abbotsford judge told me when I went to them about the Abbotsford homeowners being threatened, he said, Mr. Pelican, nobody thinks of the end. They only think of the beginning, what they can grab. Bring it before us in the courts, and we'll make them decisions. So the farmers have to look after yourselves. So let me tell you, I know from great experience, because I told you I was a young man when Ted Dyckman was here, and he owned his cattle barn, and all these people were farmers. Tremendous guys. I will never lose them ties. The farmers have to show that we stand by the farmers. Farmers will stand by farmers. When one baler breaks down here, Joe phones Bob, Bob phones Bob, Susie phones Susie and says, hey, we got that. If you weren't dismantled like Henry did for the greed to take Mo and all them off the Dyke Committee, you could have phoned each other and said, listen, I got a cattle truck, I'll get your cows to higher ground. Instead, you had to go for the abuse of being threatened by Ross Siemens, panicking, and the grief. Anytime that I find as Commander-in-Chief that you're being stopped from having funds that protect you and third that, I'll bring massive charges up on my bureaucrat friends or anybody who's doing that. I know from my farmers and working with you, I feel you're hurt. I know what it's like to go through something like this brutal and devastating. You got mortgage payments, tractor payments, you got no financial, and I got a coward MP, Brad Viss, and the shit standing on the world stage asking for the gravel pits and building the dikes. Nobody should do that when you got victims. You should be asking for the victims to have their homes fixed first of all so they don't get sick, get their food, look after the cattle, and then we'll look after the dikes. I think that this secondary flood wasn't just a chance. I think it was an actually acts of God, okay, of the negligence that's being done in our city to bring worldwide attention to it. So the farmers need to create their own board. They need to get up there. You do not need the city to do it. Why? Why do I want to speak clearly? I saw through the manipulation what Henry did firsthand with his son, how he controlled what the city controlled, he controlled. He controlled it for leverage, he controlled it for votes, and he controlled it for manipulation. When you got your own boards, you could control your own destiny, and then they got to come to you for the votes. And that way, when all these boards are split, that's why I fight so rigorously now with politicians. So my MP and my MLA's office, like my Pamela Alexis was working with Mike. We saw that. We showed you posted videos of them looked like they were kissing, hugging each. They're not allowed to be that. They're supposed to hold each other accountable. When I become your Commander-in-Chief, and anybody else who wants that Commander-in-Chief, will make sure that there's funds there that you get paid to do, you get paid back by our taxpayers. That's why that was created. That's why we collect taxes. And we will make sure that we bring economic drivers in to help you. But we'll make sure the first thing to all victims, that your houses and mold and responsibility that was done by this negligence, and I understand now, and I get it, that none of the councillors have showed their face. None of them been here to put, even if you wanted to, never mind show your harm that you caused to the farmers, but to put pressure on Carney saying, hey, I'm here with Otto Dyckman and Ted Dyckman and what they suffered, and as a council, I'm telling they can't do it because they put them farmers in harm's way. It was about them. It was about the infrastructure. They were too busy with Ron Funk and changing zones in Cooper's Farms, beating down on the community, building a police building rather than their city duties. Bruce Bandman made it clear, and Darren Brown showed me, that he advocated that money to fix them pumps and dredge them ditches because this was coming, and you need good pumps that can suck. Right, Henry? You need something that can really suck. Not Ed Fast and not Mike DeYoung, but you need them big pumps that can suck. And that is what we need. They were blocking these boards. They were halting people from the city. You need to become a voice. You need to stand united, and you need to stand that you will not stand for this intimidation. You all know that Henry's running Ross from the back. You all know it. And there's no if, buts, or maybe. You could see the protection put around Ross. You could see no harm. You could see the rocks weren't scandalized them. You could see it all. Darren Brown made it show. Abbotsford residents and myself's lives were brutally threatened and targeted by our own people that we walk around in this community for greed. And that is unacceptable. And all politicians that have an oath banded the Abbotsford residents and left them because Henry had them all tied to each other. Ed Fast and everybody wouldn't call press conference and everything. So I'm going to tell this. Before you stand on this world stage, Brad Viss, and do more belly aching for Henry Braun and that infrastructure money to get them gravel pits, you well know that I know from developers and everybody that you expropriate them gravel pits, and you should be asking the speaker to expropriate it to help the farmers. It was always about this money, build the dikes and everything else. They didn't care your children laid in mold. They didn't care you were struggling. They didn't care the emotional distress or anything. I want to be your voice. I want to be your voice, and I want to make sure anybody else who wants to be and work for you as a public servant, that they're your voice. I'm adamant of challenging Bruce Banman. I'm adamant of challenging Suk Mangel. I'm adamant about challenging these great people to stop tiptoeing through Abbotsford and stop doing that, and put your boots on the ground and call it out. Before we put any money on a bloody dike or a piece of gravel, we fix them homes, we fix them residents, we look after them children, and we look after them victims. And even the President of the United States, you could see him calling out the genocide on other countries because it's about human beings. This was about a rich and elite establishment that owned a private police department to threaten everybody and block everybody. So the Abbotsford farmers, you have to create your own board like the South Asians did on the downtown DERS, and create it because they weren't getting represented. You have to cut away from the Chamber of Commerce. You have to cut away from these groups and these boards, and you all got to have different boards and everything. That is why my industry, what I worked in, is so good. The electricians, the plumbers, the contractors, they all hold each other accountable, and we got great jobs, we got high rises, and we build fast and we build quick because everybody minds theirs, and they all accountability, and if something goes wrong, they call each other out. It's a concrete guy's responsibility. Henry Brown knew as a mastermind and then as a trained tycoon how to control it all and manipulate it all and wheel them two guys. The men that should be here are the guys that ask to be your leaders, and they should never stop fighting for your families or your homes or the mortgages you got to pay on them big elite equipment, and take another more mortgages and more hits. And some belly-aching politician like Brad Viss asking for that millions and billions of dollars to fill them gravel pits. And I told you when Darren Brown showed me, he was after that money and that infrastructure, and that's all he was. He didn't care about a victim. Henry could get on the stage no longer as the mayor and ridicule Justin Trudeau, but he couldn't hold David Eby just as responsibility because he was working the back deals to bring the West Coast through Pam. He couldn't do it all. He couldn't stand beside the farmers. He couldn't fly the farmers out to Ottawa and say, Mr. Speaker, the farmers are here to speak. He couldn't do none of it because he didn't care less about the farmers. He could give a rat's ass about our farmers or the actual individuals. He cared about greed, and Abbotsford will not stand for it. There's no longer a George Ferguson here. That we got to make clear. There's no longer a Bill Vander Zalm here. There's no longer that. You have to look after yourself. And Abbotsford will tell you from going down this road, many homeowners, I will not ask you to be in danger or stand beside me and call things out and do podcasts. I will do them for you because I'm asking to become Commander-in-Chief, but I will not allow anybody to threaten you, intimidate you, when you can justify, say, Bruce Banman allocated that money, said clean them ditches, fix them pumps, because the overflow of the Nooksack would have been drained out immediately. Ross and them put you in control because it was about development, the official community plan, and now put you and your families in harm's way. And they all looked away. Our elected councillors that went in there and looked away and played these childish games and can't stand by you. That is the official job that they asked to do. And that means that we must ask the law and our community to officially look at them, that they were running their own businesses. I showed you, Ross is busy all day long as your mayor at his gas station, double dipping. Brenda Falk was running her bistro restaurant, double dipping when she's a city council. And I showed you that every one of them. Dave Sidhu was running his Capritra newspaper. When you sign up to be a city official, that is what you get up at 7 o'clock till you quit at 3 o'clock, is you work on that budget that the city taxpayers are paying you, and they didn't. Oh, we can make an extra by running my business. Henry only needs me on Monday night and at his house to say pass. As a matter of fact, my free time, Abbotsford residents' free time, we have done more in this town as not as a city elected official for our community than anybody. I'm live, Abbotsford, British Columbia.